Chinese engineering ticks that when you get bit, you now become allergic to meat. This isn't conspiracy. That's literally happening. They have found ticks that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was a part of, that if you get bit, there's over 400,000 something Americans that are already now affected by this rare disease.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hey everyone, welcome to Weird Wednesday, where we are going to continue our conversation from Monday with AJ Richards.
I think the silent majority is bullshit.
Yes.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think what that means for me, what that bullshit means is we shouldn't be silent. That's bullshit that we're silent. And the mainstream media isn't actually telling us how many of us there actually are. Look what happened with Public Square when they went public last week. Mm-hmm. That's a sign right there that there's actually a lot more of us just going about it, but because we're silent, we don't know. Right? We don't know. Now, I'm also rural, so I know for sure around me, I'm not in New York, I'm not in Chicago, I'm not in LA. Maybe it is a minority there, but you know, what scares me or what gives me concern and what I'm really, really frankly trying to do here is the foundation of what we're trying to create is a place to get the right information. Mm-hmm. That's at the core, because bad policies are always going to come up.
Right.
But if you have a single source of information for the decisions that are being made for you, for your food, that you can get a real clear like understanding, then maybe you'll show up and vote and keep that crap from happening, right?
Right.
Because when Hitler did what he did, he only got the buy-in of 10%. That's it. What they did to the Jewish people, and when this whole war kicked off, he got the buy-in of 10% of his population, and that's all it took. I guarantee there was a lot more in the 90% that didn't agree with it, but they weren't vocal. So they didn't know. And so people stayed living in fear of, well, if I do this, what happens? If I do this, I'm going to lose my job. If I do this, I'm going to, mm-hmm. And we kind of already got an example of what that looks like with the COVID vaccine.
Oh, exactly. Right. But we have social media, and mm-hmm. podcasts and really, I feel like TikTok and maybe Twitter now, but
yes,
between that and podcasting, like we're actually able to find out, most other people, I would say, don't agree with this craziness going on. But before, when all you had was the mainstream news or, newspapers to rely on, I could see how that happened. But I don't know, hopefully all that happened so that we can kind of gear up and make sure that it never happens again. And I think we do that by taking back control of basic things like our food.
Right.
What's scary is, you have kids these days, like just young kids are being taught to the biggest worry, the biggest concern in their entire life is climate change. And that the only way to stop climate change is to get rid of farming and ranching and focus on this, lab grown food. And you just taught me something with this whole, regenerative land kind of idea that I had no idea about that. Yeah. And so we're this push to get rid of animals when in fact we need to do the exact opposite. I think most people would just be blown away by understanding the reality of that information, and that we're just being told the opposite, and our kids are being taught the opposite. Mm-hmm. And, they are all scared to death, and, no more animals, no more this, no more that. Yeah. And it's just a very sad statement about what's happening.
Yeah. It really is. And it's propaganda, right? Propaganda. They get the message that's funneled to them, and then it's the headline thing. They're kids. They're just distracted. And we also now live in a world where, I think it used to be like, if you watch a movie, it might ruin your movie watching experiences now, but you'll notice that they change the camera's angle constantly. Even if it's just two people talking, they change the camera angle every 4 to 7 seconds. They have to, because you'll lose attention, mm-hmm. right? And so now you've got kids on TikTok where it's like, even myself, I'll notice like I'll be watching something that's 3 minutes long, and I'll scroll after a minute and a half, and I'm like, wait a minute, I really like that. Why did I scroll?
Right.
Because my brain is so used to like next, you know what I mean? And so like I'll go back and make myself be patient to finish a 3-minute clip. It's only 3 freaking minutes. So I'm a victim of that. Now you take a developing brain like my children's, and if you give them the opportunity to have that happen, oh man. And then think about how that trickles down to conflict resolution.
Right.
Like instant gratification, conflict resolution. Yeah, you know, it's a terrible deal all around. But they don't know, and so they just assume, again, the headlines, that getting rid of all animals and making everything in factories is the best way to go. It's better for the environment, and actually, that's the fastest way to. You know, what's interesting is they're selling us on this idea of global warming. We need to get rid of cows and other livestock, but actually the exact opposite will happen. If you do, we will speed much faster towards desertification without the animals than and if we go to this factory area, and then it'll be too late. It'll be too hard to, like, right now in our country, we're at 1960 level cattle numbers. So our food chain is broken. It's very low with 2023 population. That's because of drought. A lot of people had to sell off big parts of their herd, especially in Texas last year because of the droughts. And so, and it takes, no matter how bad you want it, still takes 24 months before any animal's old enough to process. But now if you're trying to regrow a herd, well, now you're talking 4 years before you've got your calf, but I want to keep all my females, so they're not going to go to slaughter. So that's inventory out of the meat supply chain, because I'm trying to grow my herd. So all my heifers, I'm going to keep them so I can grow my herd. Well, that's for every heifer I have. Good for me, I'm growing my herd, but that's for every heifer I have is one not going into the meat supply chain. So we're talking years of rebuilding just to get back to where we should be. So then, okay, what's the solution? Oh, well, let's bring it in from Paraguay. Let's bring it in from Brazil. Let's bring it in from, and then, okay, so we're importing beef from Brazil. Now they're leveling the Brazilian rainforest to grow more cattle for global consumption. And so now they're causing problems down there. 2 years ago, I was watching documentaries where some of the caballeros, I'm not going to vilify all of them because I don't know that culture, and I know there's some good people down there, but the corrupt ones were killing and murdering the indigenous tribes as they were clearing the forests because they were fighting them and they wanted more ground. So they were killing the people, trying to keep them from leveling the forest to have more grazing ground. When we have all that we need here, if we changed the Bureau of Land Management policies, if we implemented some of these things that we now know exist from people like Alan Savory, if your audience is interested in this topic of regenerative, Google or look on YouTube for Alan Savory TED Talk. That was the single video where I'm like, okay, this is, I'll spend the rest of my life doing this so that my kids have a better option. And he runs what's called the Savory Institute. And throughout the US, they have a group called Land to Market. And Land to Market is a network of producers following those practices and selling that product in. Now, something else we have to be aware of, because it's all about the dollar. Organic used to mean something. Now it means nothing, because the big corporations latched their greedy little paws onto it and manipulated it to meet their demands. Regenerative agriculture will be the same way if we're not hyper vigilant. And they're already trying to do that. Nestle just announced, we're going to be fully regenerative by 2030. I call bullshit. I can appreciate the sentiment, but I call bullshit. I doubt they're going to actually live into that, right? They're going to cut corners, and then before we know it, regenerative agriculture, the term will be meaningless. So we have to say, well, show me your land. Show me the actual impact. I don't want to see the name on your label. I want to see, and that, again, if it matters to you and you know your farmer and rancher, you're going to see that. So even in our platform, we're actually building this in a way that's almost a social media type platform, to where when you go to your farmer's profile, they have the ability to put podcasts on there. They have the ability to put videos. You don't have to leave our platform to go see what they're doing on Instagram or whatever. So we're going to educate our producers tell your customers be as open as you possibly can, because that's who's coming here. They want to know who you are, what your family's about, so they can see if they align with their values.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And I think that's why they want to get rid of TikTok, because this happens. People start
Yep.
talking and communicating and coming up with solutions and talking about all the crazy shit that the governments and the big corporations are doing, and they don't want that. But even with like fruit and stuff, I was watching a video the other day that all the fruit that's coming from like the Bill Gates, farms or whatever, is being labeled as organic. But when you actually look at what's going into it, there less than 1% is organic, and the rest of it is like all the same shit. And they were like, why is this allowed? They can have one organic like component, but then the rest is terrible, but then they can label it organic, and you don't know when you're going to the store.
Yeah.
So it really is like, we have no idea anymore. And I think convenience is a huge problem for this generation, because now, like with our kids, it's not even, oh, you're just going to go down the street to the store. It's like, you're going to go online, order your groceries, have someone drop it off from Walmart or wherever, and you really don't think about it. Like, you have no idea where anything comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is where we're at that like spot where if we can start a movement where you start educating your kids, like you need to know where it comes from. You need to read labels. You need to understand the process. That's the best thing we can do for future generations, because it's just gotten so on the other end where everything's about convenience.
Right. Yep. There are kids in inner cities that genuinely think that meat comes in a package.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do not know the source.
Right.
You could put a burger in front of them and have it standing next to a cow, and they wouldn't know that came from that.
Right.
And
So
that's a
true.
problem.
It's so true. Now, what about like, what are your thoughts with Bill Gates and China buying up this farmland, and then Bill Gates, what do you know? He bought up all this farmland, and then we have this lab grown meat that he's invested in, and all this Beyond Meat and stuff that he's invested in. And by the way, over the past few years where there's been all these accidental explosions, that's the same time he's been buying up the land. And I know I'm going down the conspiracy route, but we all know conspiracies end up being true. Yep. So I think my fear, and especially hearing about the lab grown meat, is like, I almost feel like they're trying to just completely eradicate a major food source, like completely get rid of it.
Yeah. You're right. And so my thoughts is, this is where intellectual food property comes in. So if he can control it all and be a major tool to vilify the rest of it. And by the way, he's engineering ticks that when you get bit, you now become allergic to meat.
Yeah, that's great. And mosquitoes or something, right?
Yeah. So, and that's all real. This isn't conjecture. This isn't conspiracy. That's literally happening. Mm-hmm. They have found ticks that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was a part of, that if you get bit, there's over 400,000 something Americans that are already now affected by this rare disease that they pulled. I just listened to it on my local radio this morning, or read the article, something like that. But when the doctors were asked about this particular disease, the majority of them didn't even know what that was, because it's new. Well, because it came from an engineered tick by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who also owns all this farmland, who also is invested in fake meat, who also has this appeal. Like, it's intellectual food.
Who also
property.
Talks about how the world is too populated, and his answer is, abortions for everyone in Africa. It's like, this guy is like crazy, and we're letting him buy up all of this land where our main food supply comes from.
And
doesn't seem very smart.
Just so our listeners know, like, he is literally the biggest private farmland owner in the United States. He has over 242,000 acres of farmland in 18 different states. From what I read, he's got like 69,000 acres in Louisiana, 48,000 in Arkansas, over 20,000 in Nebraska. And then along with him, you've got Ted Turner, who owns like 17 ranches in Nebraska, Kansas, Montana, South Dakota, New Mexico, and in Argentina. And he has over 200,000 acres. And they are both huge proponents of this whole climate change agenda and producing super crops and lab manufactured food. So what are they doing with these properties?
Well, here's what I can say about Ted Turner. Now, I don't know him, and I'm sure there's some things if you looked in his closet, but I ran into his ranch manager at a regenerative conference in Texas. They have the most they have more than 50% of the nation's bison under their management, and they're doing it regeneratively.
Okay.
So that's what I know about Ted. I don't know anything outside of that, but I'll say that for what I know about them. And the ranch manager I met was a good old boy rancher and manages the ranch for him. And they were there because they have a vested interest in regenerative agriculture as a practice. And he does. Ted has more. I think he's the largest ranch owner in Montana and probably North Dakota, but they're running bison regenerative. So they're producing high quality bison meat, which is good.
Okay.
If there's other stuff, I'm sure that might be true, but I don't know anything about that. But I will say this about China. The day we closed on the plant that I used to run up in Cody, USDA meat plant. So I did that so I'll just say this real quick. So my background, I spent the last 3 years participating in every part of the meat supply chain so that I knew what was needed for when I built the software. There are other companies that went right to the software that haven't spent a day in any of the other stuff. I hope they're wildly successful. I'm just giving you a comparison, my experience versus theirs, right? So they went quick to development. I said, I need to know everything first so I actually know how to solve it. I felt like for my own success, that was in my best interest. So part of what I did was for a year, I oversaw operations at a USDA meat plant. It was never on my radar. I didn't want anything to do with that, but I needed to understand how things work at that level. Anyway, the day we closed on this plant, I had a meeting with a Chinese company that wanted to buy all of the meat we could possibly produce in that plant and have it shipped over in containers to China. So we're like, no, we're here to feed Americans. We'll give you the leftovers. And they're like, fine, whatever you have. We never did anything with them, but they were the day we closed. I heard, and again, this is hearsay, but we had a relationship with a producer in California. Their plant was bought, and they by a Chinese company, and they brought them in and said, we want to buy all of your product. And they said no. And they said, okay, you've lost half of your processing spots, and we're doubling the price for the remaining. And the conversation wasn't in short order like that, but that's eventually what happened. So Americans have no idea. Our food supply chain right now is at war, and you don't know it. And I say that with the most seriousness. The most important aspect of your life is currently under attack by special interest corporations and by foreign entities. There's a book called The End of the World is Just the Beginning. It's a phenomenal book. The guy who wrote it, I first heard about it through a Joe Rogan podcast, but the guy who wrote it is a geopolitical scientist. And so he broke down the capabilities and the capacities of every country across the globe and what they can produce on their own and so forth. We're sitting pretty as Americans. Our resources, our natural resources through the Americas are so abundant that we actually don't depend on anybody else in the world for anything else. Of course, if we didn't send all our factories overseas, we wouldn't.
Right.
Now we do. But in a worst case scenario, and a lot of Americans are working to pull factories back to the US because then we are stable. Well, that is being attacked for our food. It's being sent away. It's being bought up. It's being controlled and manipulated through IP, and it's all being done for the dollar. And so that's actively what's happening. But that book is really good because it'll give you it'll give you a level of peace, knowing that, okay, at least if we have to fight for it, we've got something here. We're not as dependent on other countries are for everything coming in from out of our area. You know, the globalization of the world is what's put us in this position.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is totally kind of a random side note, but along the lines of what you're saying, the local news here in Tampa, they had gone to like 4 different restaurants that sell grouper. We're right here on the Gulf,
Mhm.
you know, and they say it's fresh Florida grouper. They had it tested. Every single one of the fish tested came from some other, it wasn't China. I think it might have been the Philippines, and with some other fish that like tasted enough like grouper. And they said that's like what pretty much every restaurant in the US
Yeah.
does. You're not even getting what you think that you're getting. So again, it's like we have no idea, and we need to wake up and just pay attention to this stuff, because
Yep.
we have everything here, but then we're still, you know, relying on places like China to get things, and it's so aggravating. But I feel
Yeah.
like things can shift if enough people keep waking up, which, like you said, I don't think there is this huge amount of these crazy like liberal climate activists that the news would make you think there is. I think
Yeah.
there's more patriotic Americans than we realize. We just need to start speaking up and doing
Yeah.
something about it, you know?
Well, there are 327 million people in the United States. The estimation is that 4 to 6% are vegan. You would think that it was
Whole country.
90%.
Right. Yeah.
Because I describe them like the little kids in the grocery store that don't get the sucker, and so they lay on the ground and start pounding their fists and screaming and yelling. That's vegan extremists, right?
Mhm.
And so it's just like, oh, and so what does mom do at some point? If they're a good mom, they just let them cry it out or take them outside and maybe spank their butt. But what they do is they say, fine, here's the sucker, shut up.
Yeah.
That's what's most common. Here's the iPad, just don't bother me. Here's my cell phone, stop bothering me. So the vegans are screaming and yelling, and so people are like, okay, let's give them what they want, so they shut up. There's only 4 to 6%. So that means 297 million Americans eat meat. And they're being lied to and manipulated that they're wrong, that that's bad, that, all of these things are going to happen and the climate's going to destroy us because you are a meat eater. We get into what's the acronym? CBNC or whatever, the banking system that's being put forth.
Oh, CBDC.
Yes.
Yeah.
CBDC. And so then what ends up happening is like, oh, you know what? You drove this far today, so you're not going to be able to buy meat tonight because you've used more carbon than you're allowed to use.
Yes. Did you
That's what'll happen.
Okay, the guy that started OpenAI, like the Chat GPT, he just rolled out, I think it's called WorldCoin, and it's not in the US yet. It's some other countries. People were lined up for like miles to get their retina scanned.
I saw that.
Become part of WorldCoin so that they can get their universal allowance. But exactly like you said, they'll dangle that carrot and people sign up for the free money, and then they'll say, oh, no meat. Oh, no, you're not driving anywhere. No, you can't get on a bus or a plane. I mean, that's where these 15-minute cities that the World Economic Forum talked about are a reality. I mean, it seems like, oh, that would never happen.
Yep.
They're going to put bugs in front of you to eat. Like that. This is all you get with your universal allowance,
Yep. I had people asking me like, not, they weren't really questioning, but they were kind of wondering like my messaging is really to the patriots. Like that's my people. And I said, and they're like, why single out everybody else? Like your best interest as a business is to try to appeal to everyone. And I said, well, first of all, I'm building a legacy company. We don't have an exit strategy. Investors, they say, what's your exit? Well, I don't have one. I'm not exiting. This is a legacy. This is a legacy family company. Only in recent history did people think about building companies just for the exit. And I think this one's too important to have that on there, because then it's about profit, not about impact. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the patriots are the last ones willing to line up for bug burgers.
Yes.
So I don't give a shit about anybody else. We'll still feed you, but it's not the liberals or the people that are not invested in this that are going to help make the change here. So I'm not worried about offending you. Yeah, I'm not worried about offending you. Go take a hike.
I think the tables have turned. It's like, look at Jason Aldean, who's at the top of the charts right now. It's not the liberal people. It's the patriots.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great strategy, and it's like marketing 101. If you try to sell to everyone, you're selling to no one. Like, you have a very clear message. And I'm so glad to hear you say that, by the way, because another question I was going to ask is like, how much do you want to bet one of these big four
Yep.
You know, when you gain enough traction, they're going to come knocking on your door and try to buy you up just to make you go
Yep.
away, you
Yep.
know,
And
so.
well, and that's why I've said, like, we've had people offer money because it's a software. It's going to take money. Fortunately, my partner, she's a hometown girl here in Southern Utah. Her name's Brooke Entz. She's super cool. She's a CrossFit superstar from back in the day.
I was going to say, is that
Yeah.
Brooke Entz from CrossFit?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah, I love Brooke. So we're from the same town. You know, her dad literally built all the houses in town. Really, the Entz homes are huge and a big brand name. But she's completely invested in this, and I've known her for a long time. And her and I had, you know, I got in the CrossFit world back in the day while she was in it, and so it was kind of this. It's the perfect partnership. So she came in early on, and she's my initial investor because I'm not going to take money from a VC because VCs want an exit strategy. And I don't want anybody bothering me when JBS or Cargill or one of these come along and say, we'll give you $100 million for your software.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for sale. And I don't want anybody in our team that believes that. Plus, I need people in our team that also know the risks we're taking. Like, there's two outcomes for us. Two outcomes for me, really. It's success or death.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reality. Like, you know, my brother, we were texting back and forth the other day, and I said, I'm not suicidal. He's like, I'm screenshotting this.
That's the Patriot answer to things.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I've got a long way to go before that's even a risk. But at some point, if we get 50 million users, 10 million users, I was told that you get on their radar when you sell 600 head of cows or more. That's nothing. When you sell 600 cattle a year, you're now a competitor for these guys. Well, what I'm looking to do is take that 85% from them and give it to the producers. And then they should have, those big companies, they should only be fulfilling what's left over that the smaller ones can't. That's the right supply chain. Like, we should be importing only what our own people can't keep up with. Yeah. That's the solution. And what does that mean? That means billions of dollars lost for them. Well, that's not good for my health.
Right. Yeah. No.
But if I surround myself with patriots, you know, it's like when I did the Black Rifle Coffee podcast, those guys are all, they've got backgrounds that if I can, you know, be true to myself and true to the plan and be network with guys like that. But at the end of the day, it's either, I feel like it's either I put that risk out there or I risk watching my kids starve and be fed a bunch of shit. So not even a question. When I was in Iraq, we went into a village to take care packages in. And I have this picture of me playing soccer with these little kids, and I have all my gear on. Like, I'm holding my weapon, trying to play soccer. And, but we were there to take care packages. And when I was there, I was 22, 23, something like that. I can't remember, but my brain was, I was there for a different reason. So I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening other than what I was trained to pay attention to. But then in 2020, when all this stuff happened, and really when desertification was a main topic, because most people don't know, Iraq used to be a grassland. The majority of the country was a wetland.
Yeah.
And then Saddam Hussein dammed off all the canals so that he could see as far as he could see, and desertified Iraq. It used to not be a desert. So now, and it's every bit of a desert now. And that just blew my mind when I learned that. So here we are, and we're not quite that bad yet, but I'm worried about that. And I remembered all of a sudden with these concerns, the look on this dad's face when these other men showed up to feed his family. Now, I don't know that that's what the look was, but that's what my memory remembered. And so I'm like, you know, whatever, there's nothing left for me to do in this life for me other than to try to see if I can make it better for my kids. So.
Oh, I think it's so great. And I just hope to see more and more people like you, like, doing these kinds of things, because we need it now more than ever. And like, I have 3 kids and I think about it all the time because we do all these episodes on the World Economic Forum and like all this crazy stuff that's happening. And I'm like, I don't ever want to be in a situation where my kids have to eat bugs to survive.
Yes.
You know, so it's, I'm just like, I want to support you any way I can. You need to get on Joe Rogan next. Then you'll
Joe
really
Rogan,
blow up.
Yeah. If Joe, you know, Joe has people on that he's interested in. So let's say that is the case. I'll be on Joe Rogan as soon as we have the platform to be able to support it.
Yeah.
So
it'll happen.
I mean, we've got like Black Rifle, I was interviewed by Mike Glover, who was on Rogan. We're working directly with White Oaks Pastures, who was on Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan's an absolute possibility, but if I go on it now, it's too soon. It'd be a waste of the exposure. When the software's going, then we'll have a chat if he's interested, and that'll really be our launching point, I'm hoping. So
And then you got to watch your back, because then the big four will come
yeah,
be coming for you.
Yeah, that's when I'll have the target, that's for sure.
But that's when you'll be prepared. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's all good things. The other good news is that I know of at least 4 other platforms like the one I'm developing. Like I said, some people went straight to tech. And that's good. I'm super happy for that. I'm an abundance person. Like, I am not intimidated by other people doing this, because we need it.
Yeah.
We have 327 million people to feed. My platform will never do all of that. I shouldn't be the Amazon. Look at the control Amazon has now. I shouldn't be the Amazon. We shouldn't have any one organization that has that much control. So everybody should have options of what platform they're going to buy from and how they're going to do that, and then on the other side of that too, I am more safe, because if there's 5 other people doing just as well as me, taking me out isn't going to really solve anything for them.
Good point.
And it's probably most likely going to be legal. Like, we're going to have this massive uphill legal battle. Look what happened with Uber when they had to fight the taxi industry, and Airbnb on the short-term rental, hotel lobbyists, much, much smaller lobbying groups than food and pharma. But if there's 5 of us doing this and they come after me, that's 5 people they're coming after, and 5 of us that can pull together and work to try to make this happen. So I am in the phase right now of development where the software is being developed. That's not my forte. I have a team doing that. I'm just kind of approving certain design functions and so forth. I'm now moving towards the political spectrum to connect with as many, people in Congress as I can for that protection, because lobbying is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I have to say too, like, I'm doing my little starstruck thing here, which I rarely ever do except for Andy Frisella. But I love that Brooke Entz is your partner. Like, I've been into CrossFit since 2007.
Oh, nice.
He is like always been one of my favorites. I think it was 2015.
Yep.
And I actually still coach and do CrossFit, but I love knowing that she's a patriot. Like, I had no idea, and that is awesome.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. She'll love hearing that. She's absolutely a patriot, and she shares stuff too where she's like, well, goodbye to the 100,000 of you that didn't like my post about Trump.
Yeah.
And Andy is somebody that I've had on my list. Like, if I had a magic wand and could wave it and that's the partner, it'd be Andy.
He's
talk
like a
about him,
super fan.
yes, all the time.
That's funny.
That is my dream, is to be on his podcast one day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Brooke's friends with Andy, so she's texted him for some advice I haven't connected with him yet. What's funny is kind of off topic. So I used to own a CrossFit gym in Mesa, Arizona. It was CrossFit Mesa. And during that time, I started a competition called Rush Club. It was a head-to-head weight class competition. So you earned a title belt for your division, like UFC. Yeah. And we grew that to 250,000 live viewers per episode. Wow. And then CrossFit sued me, and that was back in those days. But I was that close from being business partners with Andy, and I had somebody on my team that was responsible for making that connection, and they kind of screwed it up. So I'm like, this is my redemption. I'm gonna work with Andy one way or another. Just I love his patriotism. I love his outspokenness. When we talk about patriots shouldn't be the silent majority. Mm-hmm. They are the majority. They just shouldn't be silent anymore. That's where the respect for Andy comes in from.
He was honestly one of the biggest influences for me leaving my law enforcement career to speak out, because I was a cop for 15 years. And I've listened to Andy for years. And when the whole COVID thing happened and the George Floyd thing happened, and he was honestly one of the biggest pushes for me to say, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. I'm not going to enforce shit that I think is unconstitutional. So he's always just been like a huge influence for me. And that's why one day, Stephanie.
Yeah. You'll meet him someday, and I can't wait to see it. You'll be so excited.
That's cool. Awesome.
Well, let everyone know like what they could do now, where they can support you and follow you, so they can just watch this all unfold.
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking. So we have a Discord group. If you go to my website, feedthepeoplebythepeople.com, you can sign up, and you'll get a link to join our Discord group. I'm going to just tell you now, the Discord group was a place for us to start gathering. It's not efficient. I get producers in there as often as I can in your different areas. So if you go in there, just be patient. Like really, you should just join to hear the updates. And if I can get you connected with a producer before the software's up or before you do it yourself, great. So if you just want to be a part of the community we're building of people that want to know where their food comes from, join our Discord group and then just be patient with us. I just didn't, my fear was if we go for this and then something happens before we get it going, then I didn't help anybody. So how can I at least start helping those that are willing to do some of the work on their own or stay connected? So feed the people, by the people.
Are you covering the entire United States or just certain areas right now?
The whole United States. Yeah. We'll launch the Rocky Mountain West to make sure the software works, and then we'll scale that nationwide. The scaling will only take as long as it takes to work out the kinks. But that's where the software will launch. But the community, the Discord group, all 50 states are in there. So when you join, you'll see an option to join your state. And there's people in there starting to have conversation like, hey, I tried these guys, they were great or whatever. So that's happening in our Discord group. My social media, I'm really trying to develop my Instagram my Twitter, because I feel like I won't be silenced on Twitter. And so my Twitter, simple, I got in, I guess, early enough that it's just my name, AJ Richards. So at AJ Richards. Instagram, I'm most active on right now, and that's _J_Richards. But I'm trying to get, maybe move more of that over to Twitter, because I've seen some major throttling happening on Instagram as of late. So, and I think that's pretty much it for staying connected with us.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and if you're looking to buy and source meat from high quality places right now, and you don't mind that it's shipped, Stay Classy Meats, my ranchers are phenomenal. When you buy from us, you're helping me help them, because they're trying to stay going. They're trying to do all those things. They just don't have the time to sell it. So if you're looking for something right away, and on that site, we've got all kinds of things: beef, bison, elk, farmed elk, fish, shrimp. We can handle, we're a butcher box alternative with meat that we know where it came from.
My husband and dad are going to be so excited when I tell them about this website, because they'll love it. We'll be your biggest customers.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, AJ. This was amazing. And we wish you all the success in the world. And we'll be waiting for when you're on Joe Rogan. So
yeah,
thanks
awesome.
for coming on.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.